My dad stood at my sister's birthday party wine glass, raised, declaring her his greatest gift and thanking her for giving him 2 perfect grandchildren. The room erupted in applause, while I stood frozen watching my own children play in the corner. You see those perfect grandchildren he was praising? They were actually mine. My sister had been stealing credit for my kids for 3 years, and my father had no idea he was celebrating a lie that would destroy our family forever. Hey everyone! Before we dive into this absolutely wild family drama, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. If you've ever dealt with family betrayal or stolen credit, smash that like button, because this story is going to blow your mind. And definitely subscribe, because the twists coming up will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about family loyalty. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next in this revenge story. My name is Serafina, and until that moment at the party, I thought I understood my family dynamics. Sure, my sister Miranda had always been the golden child, but I never imagined the lengths she would go to maintain that status. As I watched my father beam with pride while praising her for achievements that belonged to me, something inside me snapped. The discovery had started 3 weeks earlier when I was helping my mother organize family photos for a scrapbook project. We were going through boxes of pictures when I noticed something strange. In every recent family gathering photo, Miranda was positioned next to my children, Lily and James, while I was either cut out or standing awkwardly to the side. But it was the photo captions that made my blood run cold. Miranda with her beautiful children at Christmas morning read one caption in my mother's handwriting. Another said, Miranda's daughter Lily's first day of school. Photo after photo showed my sister being credited as the mother of my children, while I was relegated to being the fun aunt, or completely omitted from the narrative. My hands trembling, I confronted my mother about the captions. Her response was devastating. Oh, honey, you know how your father gets confused sometimes. Miranda just helps us keep track of which children belong to whom. It's easier this way. Easier this way. My 7-year-old daughter Lily and 5-year-old son James were being systematically erased from their own family history, and my mother was complicit. I demanded to know how long this had been going on, and the truth that emerged was worse than I could have imagined. For the past 3 years since my divorce from their father, Miranda had been slowly inserting herself into my children's lives in ways that blurred the lines of parenthood. She started by volunteering to help with school pickup when I was working late shifts at my marketing job. Innocent enough, right? But then she began attending parent-teacher conferences, claiming I was too busy to make it. She signed permission slips, attended school events, and even had herself listed as an emergency contact. The school administrators, teachers, and other parents naturally assumed she was either their mother or a very involved aunt. Miranda never corrected these assumptions. In fact, she encouraged them. She would introduce herself at school functions as the children's primary caregiver and talk about her kids with such conviction that people believed her. But the most insidious part was how she had manipulated my father. Dad had been dealing with early-stage memory issues, nothing severe enough for a diagnosis, but enough confusion that Miranda could exploit it. She would visit him regularly, bringing Lily and James, and would casually refer to them as my children during conversations. When Dad's memory got fuzzy about details, Miranda was there to remind him of the truth. She had created an elaborate fiction where she was the devoted single mother raising 2 children after a difficult relationship, while I was painted as the irresponsible sister who struggled to maintain stable employment and housing. She told my father that I had asked her to take over primary custody because I was working through personal issues. The lies were so detailed and consistent that Dad genuinely believed them. My investigation revealed that Miranda had even gone so far as to have mail from the children's schools redirected to her address. She had somehow gotten herself added to their medical records as a guardian. She was receiving their report cards, attending their doctor appointments, and making educational decisions without my knowledge. The systematic way she had infiltrated every aspect of their lives was breathtaking in its audacity. The financial implications were staggering, too. She had been claiming them as dependents on her tax returns. She had applied for and received government assistance for single mothers. She had even set up college savings accounts in their names, with herself listed as the primary beneficiary. Every tax break, every benefit, every assistance program that was rightfully mine as their mother she had stolen. When I confronted her directly, her response was chilling in its calculated coldness. She claimed she was protecting the children from my instability, and that she was the better mother anyway. She said Dad was happier believing she was the successful daughter who had given him grandchildren, and that my selfish desire for recognition was hurting the family harmony. "You should be grateful," she said with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "I'm giving your children opportunities and stability you never could. Dad loves them more because he thinks they're mine. Isn't that what matters?" The gaslighting was masterful. She made me question whether fighting for the truth was worth disrupting the children's lives. She reminded me that Dad was getting older and more confused, and that revealing the truth might devastate him. She painted herself as the family hero, and me as the selfish troublemaker who would destroy everyone's happiness for my own ego. But the final straw came when I learned about the inheritance plans. During a casual conversation with my mother, I discovered that Dad had recently updated his will. The bulk of his estate, including the family home, and his substantial retirement savings was being left to Miranda and her children. My biological children were inheriting everything that should have been their mother's, but they would receive it believing Miranda was their benefactor. I realized that this was not just emotional manipulation or family dysfunction. This was a long-term financial crime. Miranda had systematically stolen my identity as a mother, my children's true parentage, my father's love and trust, and ultimately, my family's inheritance. She had built an entire false reality where she was the hero of the story, and I was just a supporting character in my own children's lives. Standing in that room surrounded by evidence of her deception, I made a decision. I was going to expose every lie, reclaim my children's true identity, and make sure Miranda faced consequences for what she had done. But I also knew that if I moved too quickly or clumsily, she could paint me as an unstable person having a breakdown. I needed to be strategic, methodical, and absolutely certain of my evidence before I made my move. The war for my children's identity was about to begin, and I was determined to win. The week following my discovery, I barely slept. Every interaction with my family felt like walking through a minefield, knowing that one wrong step could expose my hand before I was ready. I had to pretend everything was normal, while internally I was building a case that would shatter the foundation of lies Miranda had constructed. My first strategic decision was to document everything. I started carrying a small recording device legally permissible in our state with one-party consent. I needed Miranda to incriminate herself in her own words to capture the casual way she referred to my children as hers, to record her justifications for the deception. I also began methodically photographing every piece of evidence I could find. The mislabeled photos, the school documents with her name, the medical records listing her as a guardian. I created a secure digital folder with timestamps and detailed notes about when and where each piece of evidence was discovered. But I needed professional help. I contacted Sarah Martinez, a family attorney who specialized in parental rights cases. When I laid out the situation during our consultation, even she was stunned by the scope of Miranda's deception. "This isn't just family drama," Sarah told me, her expression serious. "What you're describing constitutes identity theft fraud and potentially kidnapping charges depending on how the courts interpret the custody manipulation. The fact that she's been claiming them as dependents and receiving benefits meant for you makes this a federal offense." Sarah helped me understand that I needed to build an airtight case before making any moves. We developed a 3-phase strategy. Phase 1 involved gathering irrefutable documentation of my maternity and the timeline of Miranda's deception. Phase 2 would involve confronting the institutions Miranda had deceived and correcting the official records. Phase 3 would be the family confrontation armed with legal documentation and institutional support. During this planning period, I had to continue playing my assigned role as the involved aunt. The hardest part was watching Miranda interact with Lily and James, seeing how naturally she had assumed the maternal role in public settings. She would brush James's hair at family gatherings, help Lily with her homework during visits, and speak about their future plans with the authority of a parent. What made it even more painful was realizing that my children had become genuinely attached to Miranda in this maternal capacity. They would run to her first when they got hurt, ask her permission for things, and seek her approval for their achievements. She had not just stolen my identity as their mother, she had systematically replaced me in their emotional hierarchy. I started paying closer attention to how she managed the deception in real time. At my nephew's baseball game, I watched her work the crowd of parents. She would seamlessly transition between conversations referring to my kids when talking to other parents, then switching to my niece and nephew when talking to family friends who might know the truth. She had different versions of the story for different audiences, and she kept track of all the lies with remarkable precision. The most chilling moment came when Lily skinned her knee during the game. As I moved to comfort her, Miranda intercepted, scooping Lily up and carrying her to the first aid station. I followed, expecting to help, but Miranda turned to me and said, "Thanks for coming with us, Aunt Sarah, but Mommy's got this handled." The words hit me like a physical blow, but what was worse was that Lily did not correct her. That night I had a gentle conversation with my children about our family structure. I asked them to explain how they understood our relationships. Their responses revealed the depth of Miranda's manipulation. Lily told me that Miranda was her real mom, and I was her other mom who used to take care of them. James said Miranda was his everyday mom, and I was his fun mom for weekends. They had been systematically taught that Miranda was their primary parent, and I was a secondary figure. They still loved me, but they had been conditioned to see her as the authority figure, the decision-maker, the one they should turn to for serious matters. The psychological damage was profound and would require careful work to undo. I realized that Miranda's strategy was more sophisticated than I had initially understood. She was not just stealing credit for being their mother, she was actively replacing me in their minds and hearts. If I waited too long to act, the psychological bonds might become so strong that reversing them could traumatize the children. My investigation into the school situation revealed another layer of the deception. I scheduled a meeting with Lily's teacher, Mrs. Patterson, under the pretense of wanting to be more involved in her education. The conversation was illuminating and infuriating. "It's wonderful that you want to be more involved," Mrs. Patterson said kindly. "Miranda has told us how difficult things have been for you, but she assured us that you're working through your challenges. She said you're trying to rebuild your relationship with the children." The narrative Miranda had created painted me as someone who had abandoned my children and was now trying to earn my way back into their lives. Every teacher, administrator, and school staff member believed that I was the problem, and Miranda was the solution. She had inoculated them against believing anything I might say by preemptively framing me as unstable and unreliable. But this meeting also gave me an opportunity. I asked to see Lily's official enrollment records, claiming I needed the information for insurance purposes. The school records showed Miranda listed as the primary guardian with full decision-making authority, while I was listed as an emergency contact with limited rights. The medical records were even more disturbing. Miranda had somehow gotten herself added to both children's health insurance and had been making medical decisions for them. When James had needed antibiotics for an ear infection last month, she had taken him to the doctor, authorized the treatment, and picked up the prescription. I had not even known he was sick. Phase 1 of my strategy was nearly complete, but I realized I needed one final piece of evidence: financial records showing the scope of her fraud. I suspected Miranda had been claiming government benefits meant for single mothers, and I needed proof of the monetary theft alongside the emotional crimes. Through careful questioning during family conversations, I learned that Miranda had been receiving substantial tax credits, food assistance, and even childcare subsidies. She was living in subsidized housing designated for single mothers, paying reduced rent because she claimed to be supporting 2 dependent children on a limited income. The total value of the benefits she had fraudulently obtained was staggering. Over 3 years, she had stolen tens of thousands of dollars in tax benefits, government assistance, and reduced-cost services. This transformed the situation from family drama to serious financial crime with potential prison time. As I compiled this evidence, I felt a mixture of rage and determination. Miranda had not just hurt me, she had cheated taxpayers, defrauded institutions, and psychologically manipulated innocent children. The scope of her crimes demanded justice, not just family reconciliation. The time for strategic patience was almost over. Soon it would be time for action. The breakthrough came when I discovered Miranda's social media accounts under a different name. She had created an entire alternate online identity where she documented her life as a devoted single mother. Photo after photo showed her with Lily and James at parks, school events, and family gatherings, all captioned with maternal pride and tagged with hashtags like single mom life, my kids, and blessed. What made this discovery particularly valuable was the timestamp evidence it provided. I could trace the exact evolution of her deception through her posts. Early photos from 3 years ago showed her referring to them as my beautiful niece and nephew, but gradually the language shifted. By 18 months ago, she was calling them my babies, and for the past year, every single post referred to them as her children, without any mention of being their aunt. The social media evidence also revealed another dimension of her fraud. She had been accepting donations from online followers who believed her sob story about being a struggling single mother. Her bio described her as fighting every day to give my children the life they deserve, and included links to crowdfunding pages and wish lists for her kids. Strangers on the internet had been sending gifts, money, and support based on her fictional narrative. But the most damaging evidence came from a live video she had posted just 2 weeks earlier. In the recording, someone in the comments asked about the children's father, and Miranda responded with a detailed story about a toxic relationship and difficult custody battle. She described fighting for sole custody and being grateful every day that I can protect my children from their biological father's instability. Except there was no custody battle. My ex-husband, David, had moved to another state for work and maintained regular video calls with the kids, sending child support payments directly to my account. Miranda's story was pure fiction, but she told it with such conviction that her online supporters rallied around her, offering legal advice and emotional support for a situation that didn't exist. Armed with this evidence, I made my next strategic move. I contacted David, my ex-husband, and explained what had been happening. His reaction was explosive. "She's been what?" David's voice cracked through the phone. "Sarah, I've been sending child support for 3 years. The checks are cashed. The kids seem happy when we video chat. How did I not know about this?" I realized that Miranda's manipulation had been even more thorough than I thought. She had been intercepting David's child support payments, depositing them, but telling my father that the money came from her job. She had coached the children to never mention Uncle David during family gatherings, when my father was present, maintaining the fiction that there was no involved father figure. David immediately offered his full support and documentation. His bank records showing regular child support payments, our official divorce decree establishing my sole custody, and his employment records proving his stability would demolish Miranda's fictional narrative about protecting the children from an unstable father. My next ally came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Patterson Lily's teacher called me the evening after our school meeting. Her voice was concerned when she spoke. "Serafina, I've been thinking about our conversation, and something doesn't feel right. I've been teaching for 15 years, and I've learned to trust my instincts about family dynamics. Would you be willing to meet with me again? I think there are some things we need to discuss." During our second meeting, Mrs. Patterson revealed that she had always felt something was off about Miranda's story. "The children talk about you constantly," she said. "They mention Aunt Sarah in every conversation, describe weekends at your house with such detail and affection. When children talk about someone that way, it's usually about a primary caregiver, not an aunt." She also mentioned that Lily had made several comments that didn't align with Miranda's narrative. During a Mother's Day craft project, Lily had started to write, "To Mommy Sarah," before stopping and changing it to Mommy Miranda. When asked about the change, Lily had looked confused and said, "I'm supposed to say Miranda is my mommy at school." Mrs. Patterson agreed to help me document these observations and provide testimony if needed. She also revealed that other teachers had noticed inconsistencies, but had been hesitant to question Miranda's authority since she was listed as the primary guardian. The psychological impact on the children became clearer as I paid closer attention to their behavior. They were constantly trying to manage 2 different versions of reality. At family gatherings, they would refer to Miranda as Mom, but during our private time together, they would slip and call me Mommy before quickly correcting themselves. James had started having nightmares about losing his moms. When I gently asked him to explain, he said he was scared that if he loved me too much, Miranda would get angry. But if he did not love Miranda enough, Grandpa would be sad. The children were carrying an enormous psychological burden, trying to navigate adults' lies and protect everyone's feelings. This revelation strengthened my resolve, but also added urgency to the situation. The longer the deception continued, the more psychological damage my children would suffer. They deserved to know their true identity, and to live without the constant stress of managing competing narratives. I decided it was time to bring in law enforcement. I made an appointment with Detective Maria Rodriguez at our local police station, armed with all my documentation. Her initial reaction was skepticism, as family disputes rarely rose to the level of criminal charges. But as I laid out the evidence of identity theft fraud and benefit abuse, her demeanor changed. "This is much more serious than a family disagreement," Detective Rodriguez told me after reviewing the evidence. "The systematic nature of the fraud, the government benefits obtained under false pretenses, the tax fraud, these are felony charges. We'll need to coordinate with multiple agencies, including Child Protective Services, the IRS, and the State Benefits Office." She assigned a case number and began the process of documenting the crimes. The official investigation would take time, but having law enforcement involved gave me protection against any claims that I was the unstable one trying to disrupt the family. My final strategic move was reaching out to my cousin Elena, who lived across the country, but maintained regular contact with our extended family. Elena had always been perceptive about family dynamics, and when I explained the situation, she provided context that I had been missing. "Sarah, I've been wondering about this for months," Elena said. Miranda's stories never quite added up, but she was so confident in telling them that I questioned my own observations. Last Christmas, she was talking about her children's bedtime routines, but I remembered you mentioning those exact same routines for Lily and James. I thought it was weird, but assumed you had all just developed similar schedules. Elena revealed that Miranda had been telling versions of her false story to our extended family for over 2 years. Cousins, aunts, and uncles across the country believed that Miranda was the devoted single mother, while I was the struggling sister who could not get her life together. The social damage extended far beyond our immediate family. But Elena also offered something valuable. She had been quietly taking photos and videos during family gatherings for the past several years. Her documentation showed the gradual shift in Miranda's behavior and language, providing additional timeline evidence of the deception. With allies now in place across multiple fronts, legal, educational, law enforcement, and family, I felt ready to move toward the confrontation phase. But I knew I had to be strategic about the timing and setting. Miranda was manipulative and would likely try to turn any confrontation into evidence of my instability. The plan was becoming clear. I would expose the truth at a family gathering where multiple witnesses would be present, armed with irrefutable evidence, official documentation, and institutional support. Miranda would not be able to gaslight her way out of the truth when faced with bank records, legal documents, school officials' testimony, and law enforcement backing. But first, I had to prepare my children for what was coming. They deserved to hear the truth from me before the family explosion, and they needed to understand that none of the adult conflicts were their fault. The hardest conversation of my life was about to begin, but it was necessary to protect them from further psychological damage. The time for strategic patience was over. Justice was coming. The moment of truth came during my father's 75th birthday celebration. I had spent 2 weeks preparing for this confrontation, ensuring every piece of evidence was organized and accessible. My lawyer, Sarah Martinez, was on standby. Detective Rodriguez had been briefed about the potential family meeting, and I had prepared my children for what they were about to witness. The family gathered at my parents' house, the same location where this nightmare had begun 3 years earlier. Miranda arrived with Lily and James playing her role perfectly as the devoted mother bringing her children to celebrate their grandfather's special day. She wore a flowing sundress and had styled the children's hair with extra care, presenting the picture-perfect family unit she had crafted. My father was in his element, surrounded by what he believed was his loving family. He kept commenting on how proud he was of Miranda for raising such wonderful children, and how grateful he was that she had given him the joy of being a grandfather. Each praise felt like a knife twisting in my chest, but I maintained my composure. The confrontation began during the gift-opening ceremony. Miranda had brought an elaborate photo album titled "A Grandfather's Legacy: 3 Years of Love," filled with pictures of her with the children. As my father flipped through the pages, tears in his eyes, I stood up. "Dad, before you go any further, there's something important you need to know about those photos." The room fell silent. Miranda's face immediately shifted to alert concern, her actress mask slipping slightly. "Sarah, this isn't the time or place for whatever you're thinking." I pulled out my phone and began playing the recording of Miranda's live social media video, where she described fighting for custody and protecting her children from their biological father's instability. The room listened in stunned silence as Miranda's voice filled the space, telling elaborate lies to strangers on the internet. "That's my voice," Miranda said quickly. "But you're taking it out of context. I was just protecting them from their unstable father," I interrupted. "Dad, would you like to speak to David right now? He's standing by for a video call." I connected David to the family television screen. His face appeared, and he began speaking directly to my father. "Sir, I've been paying child support for Lily and James for 3 years. I talk to them every week. I've never been in a custody battle because Serafina has always had sole custody. I don't understand what Miranda has been telling you, but those are my children with your daughter Serafina." My father's face drained of color. He looked back and forth between the television screen and Miranda, confusion clouding his features. "I don't understand. Miranda said—" "Miranda has been lying to all of us," I said gently but firmly. I began presenting the evidence methodically. Bank records showing David's child support payments, the original birth certificates listing me as the mother, school records that Miranda had fraudulently altered, medical documents she had illegally accessed. But the most damaging evidence came when I showed my father Miranda's social media accounts. Post after post of her referring to my children as hers, accepting donations from strangers, building an entire online identity as a struggling single mother. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Miranda's response was to attack. "You're having some kind of breakdown, Sarah. Dad, don't listen to her. She's been struggling with mental health issues, and now she's creating these elaborate fantasies." "Then explain this," I said, pulling out the government benefits documentation that Detective Rodriguez had helped me obtain. "Miranda has been claiming Lily and James as dependents on her taxes. She's been receiving food assistance, housing subsidies, and childcare benefits by claiming to be their mother. That's federal fraud." The paper trail was damning. 3 years of fraudulent tax returns, thousands of dollars in government benefits obtained under false pretenses, documentation of her claiming single mother status for subsidized housing while the children lived primarily with me. My mother, who had been silent throughout the confrontation, finally spoke. "Miranda, tell me this isn't true. Tell me you haven't been lying to us for 3 years. Miranda's mask finally cracked completely. Her voice rose to a near shriek as she realized her carefully constructed world was collapsing. "I gave them a better life." Sarah was struggling. Dad was confused. I stepped in and made everything work better for everyone. "By stealing their identity," I asked. "By teaching my children to call you Mom while relegating me to being the fun aunt. By stealing government benefits meant for actual struggling single mothers." The psychological manipulation became clear as Miranda continued her defense. "Dad loves them more because he thinks they're mine. I didn't want to confuse him with his memory issues, and the kids are happier having a stable mother figure instead of dealing with Sarah's work schedule and emotional problems." Lily, who had been quietly listening to the adult conversation, suddenly spoke up. "Why is everyone saying Aunt Miranda is our mom? Mommy, Sarah is our real mom. We just pretend Miranda is our mom at school because she said it would make Grandpa happy." The innocent truth from a 7-year-old demolished what remained of Miranda's justifications. James nodded in agreement. "We love Aunt Miranda, but Mommy Sarah puts us to bed and reads us stories and takes care of us when we're sick." My father's reaction was devastating to witness. 75 years old, realizing that his own daughter had systematically lied to him about his grandchildren for 3 years. His voice shook when he spoke. "Miranda, how could you do this to me, to them, to your own sister?" "I did it for the family," Miranda screamed. "I made everything better. Dad was proud of me for once, instead of always worrying about Sarah. The kids had stability. Everyone was happier." but her justifications rang hollow in the face of overwhelming evidence. Mrs. Patterson arrived as I had arranged, providing testimony about the school deception. Detective Rodriguez appeared 30 minutes later to formally document Miranda's confession and begin the arrest process. The most heartbreaking moment came when Miranda realized that her criminal empire was truly collapsing. She grabbed Lily's hand and tried to leave, saying, "Come on, sweetheart. We need to go home." Lily pulled her hand away. "This is my home, Aunt Miranda. Mommy Sarah is my real mom." The complete rejection by the children she had manipulated for 3 years broke something fundamental in Miranda. She collapsed into a chair, finally understanding that her elaborate deception had cost her everything: her family's trust, her freedom, her relationship with the children she claimed to love, and ultimately her own identity. As Detective Rodriguez read Miranda her rights for identity theft, fraud, and child endangerment, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Relief that the truth was finally exposed. Grief for the family relationships that would never recover. And determination to help my children heal from the psychological trauma they had endured. The criminal empire built on lies and manipulation had finally collapsed, but the work of rebuilding our lives was just beginning. The aftermath of the confrontation was swift and devastating for Miranda. Within 48 hours, the full scope of her criminal activity became clear as multiple agencies launched investigations into her fraudulent activities. Detective Rodriguez coordinated with the IRS State Benefits Office and Child Protective Services to document the extent of Miranda's crimes. The financial fraud alone was staggering: over $37,000 in fraudulent tax refunds, 18 months of subsidized housing benefits, food assistance payments, and childcare subsidies. Each fraudulent claim carried potential prison time. But beyond the criminal charges, the social collapse was equally dramatic. Miranda's carefully curated online presence crumbled as her followers learned about the deception. The crowdfunding campaigns were shut down, and donors demanded refunds. Her social media accounts were flooded with angry comments from people who had sent money and gifts believing they were supporting a struggling single mother. The ripple effects extended throughout our extended family. Cousins, aunts, and uncles who had believed Miranda's version of events for years felt betrayed and manipulated. Family relationships that had been strained by her lies began to heal as the truth emerged, but trust had been fundamentally damaged. My father's reaction was perhaps the most devastating consequence of all. The man who had proudly celebrated Miranda as his greatest gift now struggled to process the magnitude of her deception. His memory issues, which Miranda had exploited for her manipulation, now made it harder for him to fully understand how he had been fooled for so long. "I keep thinking I should have known," he told me during one of our long conversations in the weeks following the revelation. "They're my grandchildren. How could I not recognize my own daughter's children?" I spent hours reassuring him that Miranda's manipulation had been sophisticated and systematic. She had exploited his trust, his memory difficulties, and his love for his family to create a false reality that even a fully healthy person might have struggled to detect. The impact on my mother was different, but equally profound. She had been complicit in some of Miranda's deceptions, helping to maintain the false narrative through mislabeled photos and casual acceptance of the lies. Her guilt was overwhelming as she realized how deeply she had betrayed me and my children. "I thought I was helping keep peace in the family," she sobbed during one of our difficult conversations. "Miranda said you were going through a rough patch and that it was better for the children if we didn't confuse Dad with too many details. I never imagined it was all lies." The children's adjustment was complex, and required professional help. I immediately enrolled both Lily and James in therapy with Dr. Rebecca Foster, a child psychologist who specialized in family trauma. The psychological damage from 3 years of living dual identities was significant, but not insurmountable. Lily struggled most with understanding why the adults in her life had asked her to lie. "Did I do something wrong by pretending Aunt Miranda was my mom?" she asked during one of our heart-to-heart conversations. Reassuring her that none of the adult problems were her fault became a daily necessity. James, being younger, adapted more quickly but showed signs of anxiety around authority figures. He had been trained to defer to Miranda's judgment for so long that he struggled to trust his own instincts about what was true and what was pretend. The school situation required extensive intervention. Mrs. Patterson worked with the administration to correct all of Miranda's fraudulent documentation. Every form listing Miranda as a guardian had to be updated. Emergency contact lists were revised. Medical authorization documents were rewritten. The process revealed how thoroughly Miranda had infiltrated the school system. She had been receiving report cards, attending parent conferences, and making educational decisions for 3 years. Teachers who had known her as the children's mother felt betrayed and concerned about their own professional judgment. "We pride ourselves on knowing our families," Principal Williams told me during a meeting to address the situation. "The fact that such extensive deception occurred under our watch is deeply troubling. We're reviewing our verification procedures to prevent this from happening again." The legal proceedings moved quickly once the evidence was compiled. Miranda was arrested and charged with multiple felonies: identity theft, fraud, child endangerment, and obtaining benefits under false pretenses. Her bail was set high due to the systematic nature of her crimes and the psychological manipulation involved. Her defense attorney tried to argue that this was a family dispute that had been blown out of proportion, but the financial documentation made it impossible to frame her actions as anything other than criminal fraud. The government benefits she had fraudulently obtained transformed this from a civil family matter into serious federal crimes. The most difficult aspect of the legal process was protecting the children from further trauma. The court appointed a guardian ad litem to represent their interests and ensure that the adult legal proceedings did not cause additional psychological damage. Dr. Foster worked closely with the court to provide recommendations about minimizing the children's exposure to the criminal case. Miranda's sentencing hearing was scheduled for 6 months later, but the immediate consequences were already severe. She lost her subsidized housing and had to move back in with our parents, creating additional family tension. Her job at a nonprofit organization fired her when the criminal charges became public, citing the breach of trust as incompatible with their mission. But perhaps the most devastating consequence for Miranda was the complete loss of her relationship with Lily and James. The children, once they understood the truth, were hurt and confused by her deception. They stopped asking to spend time with her and became uncomfortable when she tried to interact with them during family gatherings. "Why did Aunt Miranda lie about being our mom?" James asked me one evening. "Did she not want to be our aunt anymore?" Helping the children understand that Miranda's actions came from her own problems, not from anything they had done wrong, became an ongoing process. They needed to maintain some relationship with her as family, but the dynamic had fundamentally changed. The financial restitution process was complex and ongoing. Miranda would have to repay all the fraudulent benefits plus penalties and interest. The IRS audit of her tax returns revealed additional discrepancies. Her wages would be garnished for years to repay the money she had stolen. The court also ordered her to pay for the children's therapy costs and my legal expenses. While this provided some financial justice, the emotional and psychological costs could never be fully repaid. As the immediate crisis stabilized, I began to see the long-term impact of Miranda's deception. Family gatherings would never be the same. Trust had been broken in ways that would take years to repair. The children would grow up knowing that adults sometimes lie about fundamental truths, a lesson no child should have to learn. But through the darkness, there were glimmers of hope. My father's memory seemed clearer now that he was not being constantly gaslit. My mother was working hard to rebuild our relationship and prove her commitment to honesty. Most importantly, Lily and James were beginning to relax into their true identities without the pressure of managing competing narratives. The criminal empire had collapsed, but the work of healing was just beginning. 6 months after the confrontation, Miranda was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. The judge's words during sentencing were harsh but fair. You systematically defrauded multiple government agencies while psychologically manipulating innocent children. Your crimes represent a profound betrayal of family trust and public resources. The courtroom was packed with our family members, many of whom had traveled from across the country to witness this moment of justice. My father sat beside me, holding my hand, as the sentence was read. The man who had once praised Miranda as his greatest gift now understood the full scope of her deceptions. But the real victory was not the prison sentence. It was watching my children thrive as their true identities were restored. Lily blossomed academically once she no longer had to manage the stress of living a double life. James's nightmares stopped, and his natural confidence returned. Dr. Foster reported remarkable progress in their therapy sessions as they learned to trust their own perceptions again. The healing process extended beyond our immediate family. My relationship with my parents, particularly my mother, required extensive work to rebuild. We attended family counseling sessions to address the damage caused by years of deception and complicity. My mother's guilt was profound, but her commitment to making amends was genuine. I failed you as a mother, she told me during one of our most difficult sessions. I should have protected you and the children instead of enabling Miranda's lies. I don't know if I can ever forgive myself, but I hope someday you might forgive me. Forgiveness was a process, not a moment. It came gradually as my mother proved through consistent actions that she was committed to honesty and transparency. She became one of the strongest advocates for my children, making up for lost time by being the grandmother they deserved. My father's journey was different, but equally meaningful. His memory issues made it challenging for him to fully process what had happened, but his love for Lily and James remained constant. He began creating new memories with them, untainted by Miranda's manipulations. Their relationship, now built on truth rather than lies, became stronger than it had ever been. The extended family rallied around us in ways that surprised and moved me. Cousins who had believed Miranda's stories for years reached out to apologize and offer support. Elena, my cousin, who had provided crucial evidence, became a regular presence in our lives, helping to fill the void left by Miranda's absence. But the most significant change was in my relationship with my children. The fear and anxiety that had characterized their behavior for 3 years gradually disappeared. They stopped looking over their shoulders to see if they were saying the right thing to the right person. They began expressing their thoughts and feelings without the constant worry about managing competing narratives. Lily's teacher, Mrs. Patterson, noticed the transformation immediately. "She's like a completely different child," she reported during our first conference after the truth came out. "Her academic performance has improved, but more importantly, she seems relaxed and confident in a way I've never seen before." The school implemented new verification procedures to prevent similar deceptions in the future. My case became a cautionary tale in educational administration circles, highlighting the importance of verifying family relationships rather than simply accepting what adults claim. The financial recovery was slower, but steady. Miranda's restitution payments began during her prison sentence, though the full amount would take years to repay. More importantly, I was able to claim all the tax benefits and assistance programs that I was rightfully entitled to as a single mother. The financial stability helped create a more secure environment for the children. David, my ex-husband, played a crucial role in the healing process. His steady presence throughout the crisis proved invaluable, and his willingness to increase his involvement in the children's lives helped compensate for the loss of Miranda's positive influences. The children began spending more time with him, building a stronger relationship with their father. 1 year after the confrontation, we held a small celebration that I called our Truth Day anniversary. It was not a celebration of Miranda's downfall, but rather a recognition of our family's commitment to honesty and authentic relationships. Lily and James helped plan the gathering, inviting the people who had supported us through the crisis. Dr. Foster attended the celebration and spoke privately with me about the children's remarkable resilience. "They've learned some of life's hardest lessons at a young age," she said, "but they've also developed exceptional emotional intelligence and the ability to distinguish between truth and manipulation. These skills will serve them well throughout their lives." The children themselves had become advocates for truth and honesty. Lily wrote a school essay about the importance of telling the truth that moved her teacher to tears. James, despite his young age, had developed an impressive ability to detect when adults were not being completely honest. Miranda's absence from our lives was initially painful for the children, but they gradually adapted to the new reality. They understood that she was facing consequences for her actions, and that maintaining a relationship with her was not safe until she demonstrated genuine change. During her supervised visits after her release, the interactions were cordial but distant. The most profound change was in my own sense of identity and purpose. For 3 years I had questioned my worth as a mother, wondering if Miranda really was better suited to raise my children. Her systematic gaslighting had made me doubt my own perceptions and abilities. Reclaiming my identity as Lily and James's mother was more than just correcting public records. It was about rebuilding my confidence, trusting my instincts, and recognizing my own value. The experience had tested me in ways I never could have imagined, but it also revealed reserves of strength and determination I had not known I possessed. As I reflect on this journey, I am struck by the complex nature of family loyalty and the difference between peace and justice. For years, family members had prioritized keeping peace over seeking truth, enabling Miranda's deception to continue and grow. True healing only began when we chose truth over comfort, justice over false harmony. The children are now 10 and 8 years old, confident in their identities and secure in their relationships. They have learned that family is not just about blood relations, but about the people who choose to love and support you with honesty and integrity. Our chosen family includes the friends, teachers, and professionals who stood by us during the darkest times. Looking ahead, I see a future built on authentic relationships and hard-won wisdom. The scars from this experience will always be part of our story, but they have made us stronger, more discerning, and more appreciative of genuine love and trust. Have you ever experienced family betrayal, where someone stole credit for your achievements or manipulated your relationships? How do you balance forgiveness with protecting yourself from future harm? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because stories like these remind us that we're not alone in facing family dysfunction. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe for more real-life family drama stories. Share this with anyone who needs to hear that standing up for truth, even when it's difficult, is always worth it. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that your authentic relationships are always more valuable than convenient lies. May you find the courage to choose truth over false peace in your own families. YouTube description 100 words. What happens when family vengeance meets systematic deception that spans 3 years? This shocking true story will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about family loyalty and trust. When my sister was praised as the perfect mother at a family gathering, I had no idea I was about to uncover the most elaborate betrayal imaginable. She hadn't just stolen credit. She had systematically erased my identity as a mother and replaced it with her own through calculated manipulation that involved schools, government agencies, and even my own father's memory issues. This isn't just another family drama. It's a cautionary tale about identity theft, psychological manipulation, and the devastating consequences of unchecked deception. From fraudulent tax returns to manipulated school records, the scope of her crimes will shock you. But here's the twist that makes this story unforgettable: the moment when family vengeance met cold, hard justice. Watch until the end to see how karma delivered the perfect punishment, and how I reclaimed not just my children's identities, but my own sense of worth. Will justice truly be served? The ending will surprise you.